Common milkweed is a really important plant for monarch butterflies. It's a widely distributed plant. Originally, this plant had probably a pretty narrow distribution. It wasn't very common in prairies, if at all, but it did occur in some open glades here and there. And it's interesting that this is a plant that we would consider to be a pioneer plant. It's a plant that uses disturbed sites really very well. So it's a plant that's a good colonist, we say. It can move into new areas, and not very many of the milkweeds can do this. Well, this makes this a very valuable plant for monarch butterflies. They use this as a host plant for their caterpillars. In fact, about 90% of the monarch butterflies that end up in Mexico have fed as caterpillars on this particular plant as larvae. So it's an extremely important plant, and its distribution widespread in eastern North America makes it extremely valuable.
Common milkweed is a disturbance plant. That is to say that it does really well in disturbed sites. It does not compete well with very dense vegetation. And if you look around, you'll be able to see that if you can judge the history of a location, almost always there's some history of disturbance wherever common milkweed grows. On the other hand, if you look at areas that are very stable over time, like prairies, and you look at areas that don't receive very much disturbance, you won't find very much common milkweed. It really requires disturbance. Seems to be unable to deal with a lot of dense vegetation. One of the differences between common milkweed and Sullivan's milkweed is the common milkweed blooms from the bottom up. So here's a bloom that's already finished. This one is next that opened and it's almost finished. This one is getting to be finished. And this one has not completely opened yet. There's still some unopened buds there. I'll tell you, it smells absolutely delicious here. This is fantastic. This is one of my favorite plants. It really smells beautifully. And of course, that helps bring in a lot of insects. And you can see here we have a little bit of butterfly activity, not a lot of bee activity. The number of bees out here is minimal, partly because there's so much else out here to gather, and also because this is a somewhat isolated location. Now this is a very pale flower that we're looking at right now, and many of the flowers on these milkweeds, different clones that is, are different colors. Some are almost white like this one, and others can be magenta in appearance. You can tell almost all of these plants are from the same clone because of the similarity in the flowers. Milkweed, as you probably know, this milkweed at least, forms clones. That is, large patches of genetically identical individuals that form from rhizomes that go out laterally from the main stem, and in a subsequent year, from these rhizomes there will arise additional stems. These are called ramets.
It's not always favored as a garden plant because it has a habit of sending out rhizomes, and these rhizomes are underground shoots that could have the plant come up producing a new shoot some 10 feet away. And gardeners like to have plants stay where they're supposed to stay. And this plant doesn't necessarily stay where you put it. This plant can move around a little bit and can develop big clones. And people are kind of afraid of that habit, but I love it. I think that's fascinating. I love to see where this plant's going to pop up next. In any case, this is a wonderful plant. It's probably the most fragrant of all the flowers that you will have in your garden. If you know what lilacs smell like, it smells like lilacs, but better. This is a fantastic odor on this particular plant. It's a great nectar plant, great host for monarch butterflies. We'd really like to see people planting a lot more of this.